A year after a group of teenagers created mass hysteria at a Rite Mart by sneaking inside early during Black Friday, they are attacked in a post in regards to a Thanksgiving table. Unaware of the dangers they'll end up being, the group continue their day until a series of murders occurs. Wearing a John Carver mask, the killer continues his spree until the next target is the group. Thanksgiving is a gory slasher movie that gives the audience what it wants: entertainment from gory killings. I'm not much of a fan of this content, but I can say that it was enjoyable and did well within this genre. Although Thanksgiving followed the same basic structure of a slasher movie, I feel it was still successful as the structure tends to work for this kind of movie. However, I still feel that Act 3 is its weakest part of this structure. A basic slasher movie includes the following: a psychotic killer, various victims whose outcomes result in very crude ways, and illogical thinking from the protagonist or protagonists. Adding this to the structure, you get a specific time or place at a specific location. A psychotic killer goes on a killing spree for a reason that will be explained at the end when the protagonist makes his or her last stands. The reason this structure works is because the audience enjoys watching things unfold. They enjoy watching the idiotic mistakes the protagonists get into, trying to survive the killer in the meantime, and the brutal killings themselves. Oftentimes, these events happen because of a sin committed by the protagonists, something they did prior that motivates the killer on killing. With that in mind, the opening was pretty intense, setting up the tone and world of the movie. It brings two separate groups together through the riots of Rite Mart, which results in the catalyst. One of the teenagers created a video during these riots in a sort of mockery blog that would inspire the killer a year later. Things begin to spiral out of control for our friend group as the murders begin to occur. Per slasher movie structure, it involves a lot of killing, mainly coming from illogical thinking from the victims. As the heroes try to put the puzzle pieces together themselves, they often find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. It would inevitably result in our Act 3. When the killer is at his peak, a sliver of a chance is presented until the protagonist finally puts the pieces together, figuring out who the killer actually is. Then we get the classic "it's my word against yours," until the protagonist cleverly traps the killer in revealing to everyone who they actually are and what they've done. The reason I say that this act is the weakest is because of two reasons. 1. The evil monologue. And 2. Usually the villain defeats himself, but is only caught because he or she makes one mistake. In the slasher genre, when the killer is revealed, they usually explain why he or she did what they did, their motives, their reasonings, etc. It not only provides a reasoning behind their actions, but it also gives the audience that message, what not to do essentially. The only issue I have with this is how the monologue comes out of nowhere. At times the villain has the protagonist dead to rights, but instead of finishing them off, they defeat themselves by revealing too much. It wasn't necessarily some epiphany the protagonist gets that stops the villain, learning from what the journey provided them, but instead a clever way the villain is caught. But in retrospect, isn't very smart for the villain to just give all the evidence out, even if the protagonist isn't showing it off to the world. And while it tends to be the structure of a slasher movie, I'd prefer it end in a better, clever way to reveal to the audience who the villain actually is. Overall though, slasher movies are a great popcorn flick, where you enjoy what it is made for. It's killings. Thanksgiving continues this tradition while tying it to a tradition to create a bizarre and yet intriguing storyline. Though I'm not a fan of this genre, I enjoyed watching things unfold.